Well, today we're headed west out of Fort Worth, Texas. Now, there's a lot of things that you can see headed west out of Fort Worth, Texas, but we're only going to go about an hour outside of town and visit quite an interesting, in my mind, and unusual place. Now, there are interesting and unusual historical places all over America, and Texas is not in short supply of such places at all. We're going to a place that, for me, is honestly kind of hard to describe. To say that it changed Texas or American history, that might be a little bit of a stretch. To say it had an impact on American history, well, yeah, it did. Around the turn of the century, around 1900, you bet. Did they do things there that have never done, they've never seen done before or since? Maybe, yeah. It's just an amazing place. Now, notice I don't say we're going to a town or a city, because I think, well, I'm not fond of using air quotes, but if I was, then every time I refer to this place as a town, I would have to do that, because it never was a town. It was maybe a community. It's an amazing place, and we're going to go see it, kind of explore it, and talk to you about it, and see if you've ever experienced a place like this before, or ever visited a place like this. It's just something. If you're headed out west, dragging your RV or whatever, and you're headed out to the West Texas mountains, or even going beyond that, you're probably going to drive past this place, and you're going to look at it and you go, man, what's that over there? Well, I did for many years, until I started finding out more and more about it, reading more and more about it, and all the things that went on there. And so today we're actually going to go there, stop, explore it, look at some of the artifacts that they have there, I guess you could call them that, and just see what it's all about. I promise you it'll be different and interesting. So with that, we're going to go visit Thurber, Texas. Okay, if you're headed west on I-20, about an hour outside of Fort Worth, you're going to see this large, imposing chimney sticking up out in the middle of nowhere that's 138 feet tall. In the late 1800s, coal ran this country. We were run by either steam locomotives, steamships, things like that, or coal was used for a lot of things, all right? Factories ran off of coal or steam type of power, you name it. Coal ran everything. When we think of coal mines, we think of the mines back in New England or Appalachia or Pennsylvania. These guys, these great big tunnels, and they're getting all kinds of coal out of there at all kinds of rates. Well, that's not the only place coal was. Texas had and still has millions of tons of coal reserves in the ground. Okay, I mean, deposits of coal are everywhere in Texas, it seems like. And what happened was, let me tell you, there's four major names in this story, the story of Thurber. There were these two brothers, William and Harvey Johnson. They came here from Iona, Michigan, and started a feed, lumber, grain, and seed building right down the road in Strawn, which was quite successful. They were furnishing cedar posts to farmers and ranchers for barbed wire, and railroad ties to the new Texas Pacific Railroad. The Texas Pacific Railroad also needed, as they were expanding out here, they needed coal. Well, these two brothers said, well, there's some coal mines around here, let me see what we can do. They formed a coal mining company, a small coal mining company, and the brothers signed this contract with Texas and Pacific, and in 1887, but then in 1888, Harvey Johnson died, and the mine was suffering a little bit due to minor union strikes, and they were kind of in debt. So they sold the coal mine to this rich cattle broker. He was a millionaire, and this is in 1888, okay? And that was a lot of money. You had $1 million. But this guy was kind of a tight-fisted, hard talking kind of guy. And anyway, he took over the mine and kept it as the Texas and Pacific Railroad and started building on it. Within a year's time, he had, I don't know, let's see, something like, like 200 people working for him or more, and it just grew from there. At one time, this community had over 10,000 residents, all working for the Texas and Pacific Coal Company. Now, understand something, this was a company town. I use the town, the term town very loosely here, okay? It wasn't a town. There was never a mayor, a city council, or any taxes or anything like that that would make it a town associated with Thurber. And the only reason why it's named Thurber is because the guy who bought from the two brothers, he got an investor by the name of Thurber. His name was Robert Hunter, cattle broker, millionaire, and somebody hard to work for. Well, he had his little empire here, this company store. The company owned everything. Like I said, no mayor, no council, no school tax. The workers rode in a railway coach car to their jobs before the turn of the century. 10,000 people. The company owned every home, store, opera house, saloons, churches, newspaper, and schools. They owned everything. The miners had to pay a little bit of money for some things, especially as time went by. This smokestack is not something to do with the coal mining business or the later brick making business. It was actually part of it was the smokestack for their electric plant. They had an electric plant that ran 24 hours a day and provided all those 10,000 or more residents, some say even 15,000 at the most, with electricity for 25 cents a month, okay? And it might be the first community in Texas to ever have full electricity for every single resident. In 1904, the average miner made about $54 a month. Houses rented for $6 to $9 a month. Medical care by company doctors and nurses cost $1 to $2 a family a month. Water was $2. Electricity was 25 cents. Anyway, they had their own newspaper. They had their own printing shop. At sometimes they weren't paid in money, they were paid in company script that they printed themselves, which you could then exchange for goods. This community was huge, divided into several communities of 15 different nationalities. The building behind me, which is now the Smokestack restaurant, was originally a hardware store that sold all kinds of stuff. And then these other buildings sold other things along the way, all right? Thurber is an amazing place. I encourage you to look into it more. Right now, we're going to go to the museum, which is across the highway, which is all about Thurber and the oil in Texas and things like that.
I am the Communications and Marketing Coordinator for the W.K. Gordon Museum of Industrial History of Texas.
And you asked me how long have we been driving up and down I-20 and driving past this place and never really stopping. I guess my first encounter with it was probably I was probably in 4th grade or something like that, and my mom and dad decided, let's go to Carlsbad Caverns. And that was actually an ill-fated trip, and we never really made it to Carlsbad. We had to turn around and go home. But we stopped off here, and my dad, being the kind of person who's just a wealth of information, he knew about it. And he knew about Thurber. And he tried to explain it to me, being a fourth grader. I really didn't grasp it, but I remember it vividly. And I thought, why on earth is there a smokestack right out here in the middle of nowhere, and that kind of thing. And he just knew these kind of things. I don't know how he did it. And so, yeah, that's my first memory of it. And that was decades before you were born, I'm sure. So
this building has existed for 20 years. We were opened in 2002. And to kind of give you a perspective of what used to be in Thurber, this image up here is circa 1910. And so, unfortunately, my little laser light is dead. But the end of the brick plant over here, in that corner on the side of the kilns, that's where this building would be today. The smokestack that is here on the left is the one that's still standing. So if you look, and it's just right out this window right here. And to help kind of orient yourself around. And then, of course, in the center of this image is Shell Pit Mountain or Steam Shovel Mountain. It was known by both names, and you can also see it outside the windows here. If you take a step over. And you'll notice the difference between the mountain structure today and from this picture. They were still building bricks out of it for another 20 years.
Oh.
So what they would do is they would drill into it, blast it down with dynamite, collect the shell via steam shovel, and cart it all the way behind us to the brick plant property, where it was then mixed with water to form clay. Through an extrudation process, they would then squeeze it out into logs and cut it into bricks and then bake in the kilns.
yeah, okay, all right. Yeah, I've read about that they found a shell deposit, and they thought, well, why don't we start making bricks? And that's it, really.
That's it, yes.
That's pretty much it. Wow. I know you have this whole thing that you go through all the time, and you know more about it than anything, but I have crazy questions. Like, there were how many mines total by the end? Something like 17 or something like that?
Something like that.
Oh, you're going to answer my question.
15. So this here is 15 maps, and this is while they were still producing coal. I believe another 1 or 2 mines were opened. Once they hit 13, they named it new number 1, and then they started counting again, 13 being an unlucky number.
Oh.
And so this here
yeah,
is one
miners
of the,
were kind of superstitious. That's true.
yes.
Yeah.
They would go in through the center of the mines, and they would fill out these as they would go through the mines for their progression throughout.
So this is all surface pits? No.
No, it was just not quite 500 feet for the deepest mine.
Oh,
just shy of
okay.
500.
All right. So, okay. So they did have the tunnels and things.
Yes, but when you think coal mines, you think North America, where you've got the giant caverns of coal. Thurber,
Right.
that wasn't the case.
Right.
It was all thin lateral coal seams.
Right, I knew that.
And there was hardly a place where they could actually fully stand up.
Right.
We actually have tales that the wives would sew extra padding into the miners' clothing in order for them to be more comfortable while they worked.
Yeah, on their knees and things like that. Mm-hmm. Sure, yeah. You have a diorama or something like that showing that here, I think. How they worked laying down, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, can't wait to see that. And, yeah, you don't, it's kind of funny. You don't picture coal mining in Texas. Somebody says coal mining, you're thinking Pennsylvania, somewhere in New England, and you got these great big tunnels, you know, of coal and the carts and all that type of stuff. This wasn't like that at all. First off, Texas has enormous coal deposits. It's not just in Pennsylvania, things like that, in the Appalachians, you know, like you think about. Texas still has lots of coal.
Even in Thurber, there are still millions of tons of coal through the area today.
Right.
But because of OSHA's requirements for strip mining, for the process to pull it out now, it's actually not worth as much as what.
No, because they got to move so much overburden and things like that.
The land's more valuable as ranch land currently.
Yeah, sure. And but that's amazing. Okay, and these mines, I mean, like, where are they? I mean, am I looking at them? Basically, I kind of.
So the easiest way to show you would actually be this map over here. They did close all of the mines when the company left, and so there are private properties where they have just like a little bit of hovel over where they used to be. So you've got the railroad to mines here. This here was. A scan of this was given to us by New York Hill, who has the original map. It extends about this much further on each side. and they let us use it for educational purposes. So you've got the railroad to the mines out here. You've got the first mine, number 1, here. And so that would be underneath the town. You've got where the interstate is today, and this is not 100% to scale, but it's as close as what we've got. And then, of course, we have what the smokestack that's still standing used to look like. A lot of people think it is the brick plant, but it's actually the power, ice, and light plants.
Yes, yeah. I always thought it was going to be for the kiln, but it's not. It was for the power plant that ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, making this the first fully electrified community in the state, I think.
We are in competition. I believe there's somewhere near Galveston that is.
They're claiming it.
So yeah, I believe we've got to get our date for the whole 100% electrified, because it took them a while to build up to that.
Yeah, but that's probably a town, an actual community, or a incorporated town,
yes.
Which this never was.
No. So today we are in Mingus, Texas, not Thurber, Texas.
Right.
And so,
but it was never a town. If you call it a town, it was pretty much one man's kingdom. Am I right on that?
Yeah, it was completely company owned.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so all of these triangles here are interactive. I highly recommend you come back and play with this map as you go through things. And then you've got the Hill District, which was in the company's maps is what it was called, was the Hill District. And the nationalities would settle in. So we've got Polander Hill, Italian Hill, and Stump Hill. Those designations were actually not made by the company, but by the populations who settled there. New York Hill was given that designation. It was where a lot of the white-collar workers would come.
Yeah,
from
the executives.
And the executives, yeah. And
yeah, that's kind of what I figured.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Great map.
This room here is a changing exhibits room. We change it out 2 or 3 times a year. Right now we have looking back at toys on display.
Oh, wow.
And then this
wow.
image here is of the original Opera House. It's a little dark in this corner here. But you'll notice the banners in front say Titanic. And so as soon as the Titanic had sunk, it was such big news that any objects or photographs or footage that had survived was being shared. They started making films about the Titanic within a year after it had sank.
Assassination, if you will, of Jesse James was a popular thing that they did at one time. They would do in Opera House. Another fascinating thing I never thought about. Wow.
The original Opera House would have seated nearly 600, but there's not a second story in here for us to squeeze those people in.
Yeah.
So of these images of Thurber, this is of the quadrangle, which was the town square. And you've got the bandstand. There were 3 or 4 throughout town. You also have the Opera House here, and the water towers in the back. This building here, in the back corner of it, which isn't pictured, they would have actually had switchboards for the company's phone lines in order for them to call back to their investors out in New York on business.
Okay, now the bandstand, is that the one I see that survived? It's over here on the...
So the one that survived, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
The one that survived, we don't know which one it would have been.
Oh.
And which designation or which spot it would have been located in the town. It was, at one point in time, it was used as a house for a couple and their 2 dogs. It had been found a couple of towns over, boarded up with a little add-on. And so they sold it, and then it was relocated again back to Thurber.
Well, I'm sure that's true. I mean, once everything closed down, I'm sure these houses were bought and moved places all over the state.
They were selling homes for $40 and $50. They cut them in pieces and load them up, move them, or they just move them whole. Have you ever been on 108 between here and Stephenville?
No.
So if you go down 108, there's a Hannibal Lodge, and sometimes the lower story of it is actually used as a restaurant off and on, depending on what businesses pop up. But it is actually a store from Thurber that was moved in 3 pieces and reassembled there.
Wow.
So of the pictures here, this one's actually my favorite. It was of the livery stable. And if you lived and worked in Thurber and needed a mode of transportation, the livery stable is where you'd go. You could rent donkeys, carts, horses, buggies, and even later automobiles. Thurber also had an overland car dealership. There was a gentleman, I believe it was Brand Pipes, is his oral interview that we have, and he was a kid in Thurber and then later worked in Thurber. He said as a kid he got to run through the ice factory and pick ice off of the machines after school. Him and some of his school friends did. Would free the ice plant from buildup, and it was a nice little treat in the schoolroom for them. But then later he worked for the dealership, and he said his job was to sell cars, but you didn't want to sell more than 3 in one day. And that was because the next day his job was to go out and teach the person he sold the car to how to drive it.
Wow.
And so if you had more than 2 or 3 lined up,
You couldn't get them taught. Yeah.
He did say he had one gentleman he didn't quite feel safe leaving the vehicle with. He didn't think he'd ever pick it up. And at that point in time, Thurber was all dirt roads. You didn't have the interstate coming through or any of that.
Wow. Yeah. But did the Bankhead eventually come right through here?
The Bankhead Highway was paved with Thurber bricks mostly. We used to have a book in our gift shop that's no longer being published that would be able to tell you a lot more about that. I can get you a title for it if you can find one. It's just kind of harder to find.
About the Bankhead, or
about the Bankhead Highway? Yes.
I've read the state of Texas has a site about it that's pretty good. I've read that, but it really only covers all the Bankhead stuff in Texas, you know. But I find the Bankhead fascinating.
Most of the Texas portion was paved with Thurber brick. This image here is on the original Opera House, so that we can track them coming and going in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. They were out here so frequently. And so through the historic archives, every other week, we can kind of see historicistras headed to Thurber, returning from Thurber, and yeah, Fort Worth just being right there.
Was this a destination for like Fort Worth? They could come here and go to the opera houses and things like that?
Well, Thurber is known for having the best prices in the mercantile around the area. People would come from Dublin and get on a train and hop over and do their shopping and head home. And so
I never dreamed of that. I always thought that the company store, you know, probably had pretty high prices or something like that. But I never dreamed it would be such a, well, of course, I mean, it would probably be the biggest mercantile or the biggest store anywhere around, because they've got those 10,000 people there who shopped at it. So they had the most revenue and stuff like that in order to be able to buy better goods and things like that. Wow.
Yes. So management realized that if your workers are happy, they're more likely to stay. And the film was produced as a PBS special initially, and we've got an excerpt from it for our introductory film. It is a little misleading. It tells you that they were only paid in company script. That's not actually the case. We found that it's really only about 2/3 was allowed out in script, because Gordon had recognized that there was the tendency to rack up debt and run to the next company town.
Yeah.
And so he didn't want that to become the norm at Thurber. And so that way you'd still have that left to pay over what you needed to pay, along with your utilities and whatnot for the next month. I have a Thurber brick. And so this is one of many that they produced. It does not have the triangle marking or the Thurber brick on there. But we use this for field trips, and we have the kids pass around the Thurber brick. Thurber brick was known for being very heavy and very durable. That is dense. And so it was known as the best brick around because it could stand a lot of wear and tear.
Still Thurber brick?
That is still Thurber brick.
Surviving?
From my understanding, Fort Worth actually buys up Thurber brick when they can to replace bricks as needed. This is on the back of the t-shirts in the gift shop. And so this is what we know of for sure. We forgot when we edited to add mineral wells on, so the next reprinting of these, that'll be added. But as we have people contact us saying we've done road work and pulled up Thurber brick, or
with the triangle on it, with the letters on them,
the ones that are stamped, we know for sure. There's also old newspapers when they have the streets put in. As we come across those in different research adventures as we go through archives and whatnot online, we add it to our list, because at that point it's proof that yes, it is Thurber brick there.
All right.
And so you said Garland?
Yes.
Let's see. I do not have Garland on there, so we'll have to do some more research into that.
They are saying they have an actual original portion of the Bankhead, which there's a good chance it was Thurber brick, but I don't know. They may not be even thinking in those terms, because people don't think of Thurber like they should. You know, Thurber impacted the 20th century, and for example, when Gordon decided to maybe look into oil and went down to Ranger and did the first oil well in Ranger, creating the Ranger oil boom. Okay, the Ranger oil field during its time was the largest oil field in the world. And it was at a perfect time when Russia was, right after World War I, Russia was very unstable with the Bolsheviks and Lenin and all that type of stuff. And a lot, if not a majority of the world's oil was coming from Russia at the time. So he said, man, you know what, I think oil's where it's going to be. And he goes down there and brings about the Ranger oil field. And gosh.
So Gordon was an amateur geologist.
Yes, an engineer.
As well, yes. We actually have patents up that he designed for the coal mines, and they put in use at Thurber. Yeah, it was a sore subject for him in the company because they had paid, professional geologists to come out, and they had said, no, there's no way there's oil out here, and he kept searching, kept buying up oil leases, and then eventually struck oil in Ranger, and the company was like, oh, hi there, best friend. And so, and it is touted as the oil boom that helped win World War I.
Exactly.
And so it did come at almost a perfect time for ammunition.
Men were riding horses and marching into battle, and by the end of World War I, we had air combat going on. We had not only did we have motor vehicles, but we had airplanes doing air-to-air combat. That's how much in just a few years it changed from basically, like doing battle like the Civil War to air-to-air combat. And a lot of that was brought about because the world was getting off of coal and getting into petroleum and gasoline and things like that, and the Texas Pacific Oil and Coal Company supplied a lot of that petroleum to the war effort.
That's even locally, the Texas Pacific Railway bought the company, like 2/3 of the company's coal to power their trains.
Right, he saw where things were going and realized that they needed to do that.
So we are named the W.K. Gordon Museum after W.K. Gordon Sr. This was put into place, it was a dream of W.K. Gordon Jr. to build a museum out here. And after he passed away, his wife, Mrs. W.K. Gordon II, saw it to fruition.
I'm surprised, and I think it's all because of Gordon, that the community, the company, town, whatever you want to call it, did as well as they did to take care of their employees. And I think a lot of that was Gordon's doing or at his insistence, because
I've heard stories about that as well. I have not found definitive proof of documentation from Gordon saying that.
Being the good guy?
Yeah, well, not necessarily that he wasn't a good guy, but the company was going to take care of this individual at his behest.
Right.
I'm not saying that it was not, but we are still...
Oh, no, we don't know that. But everybody worked well with him.
There is plenty of stories about how beloved he was by the town.
Yeah.
When his daughter passed away, the entire town shut down work in mourning. And then for her funeral as well. And so,
wow. This is an amazing story. And you and I are just scratching the surface here, really. I know
there's so much more, yes.
There's so much more, I know. This is amazing. And you're amazing. I can't believe that we got you.
Stores here. We have the drugstore and the mercantile. You can purchase just about everything you needed at either one.
Texas Miner.
And so the name of the newspaper was the Texas Miner. You can actually find them online at the Portal to Texas History, which is a free resource that you can delve through, provided by UTA. And you can find, I believe, like 70 to 80 issues of the Texas Miner on there that you could read. From the 1890s to the early 1900s. There are sections of the newspaper in Italian because the Italian population in Thurber, it was the highest minority.
Yeah.
Life by Marilyn Reinhardt details a lot of the census information and labor history. And so, you've got the highest ethnicity of coal mining population, and for the Italian, the larger part was in Erath, but you can actually go through records at Erath and Palo Pinto and go through naturalization records, that there were a lot of citizens of Italy that then renounced their Italian citizenship or went through the process to begin that when World War I started.
Wow.
These pictures over here of the Texas Pacific train car. This train car was Marston's personal car. He would take it from New York down to Thurber.
Whose car?
Marston's. He was the president of the company. After
When?
I do not know when he took over. He was Hunter's son-in-law.
Oh.
And so after that switch happened, he stayed most of the time in New York and would come down for visits.
Okay. Well,
But
Hunter died in like 1903 or something like that.
Shortly after they transitioned the move. It was, I think, 1 or 2 years and he had passed away.
Yeah. Okay.
And so this train car actually went up for sale in a private auction in 2021. And I cannot remember the exact price. It was somewhere in the $7 to $9 million range. And it was in good enough condition to be loaded on the rails and just hauled off to its next destination. And that's kind of all we've heard about it. It was just a little blog post that had popped up on our radar. But yeah. I want to know, like, were these chairs bolted in or were the people sitting in them at the behest of the brakes? So this is our life in Thurber section. You've got education, special activities, leisure. Baseball was really popular in Thurber. They played in the Oil Belt League. This is actually the first airplane to land in Thurber in 1909. And then shortly after that, when there were carnivals and whatnot that would come through, they would have planes fly in the carnivals, and you could ride in an airplane around the town for 50 cents. Here's the schoolhouse. We have, at that point in time, the government only subsidized up to 6 months of school. And in, again, the newspapers that you can find on the Portal to Texas History, you actually have collections being gathered to keep the school open longer at that point. And even Hunter and Marston both were actually donating to all of the schools in town to keep them open longer during the year. And so you've got the image here of the schoolyard. You've got school children here with their names. We've got a yearbook from 1922, and then Cecile Boiler here. This is her class ring here. We have this couple here. Her wedding dress is actually in collections. Her family sent it to us. That is handmade.
So Thurber was a big deal.
Yes.
I mean, it was a big deal in Texas.
Even in the early versions of newspapers in 1898, every couple of months you see pop up that a new ball is being held and the gentlemen are coming out to greet the ladies. And there was, I believe I can't remember the term they used for the type of ball they had, but essentially it was gentleman's choice, and they did specify, that ladies could refuse a gentleman who had asked.
Once the company unionized, that they started putting initials for the unions on the bricks.
So yes, you can actually see that on one of the bricks over here. So that's what the triangle stamp was. That was the union symbol. It held the 3 pillars of the company, which is brick, tile, and terracotta, and it's marked here. Yeah. It was not marked on all of the bricks that they made.
Yeah, but they had the brick, tile, and terracotta unions. I mean, there was a dozen unions here once they finally unionized.
Yes, and for about 12 years, I believe it's 10 to 12 years, somewhere around there, the entire town was unionized.
Yeah, it was, but with several associated unions.
Yes, there were multiple unions.
Oh, wow.
And if you were not working in Thurber and part of a union, you were supporting unions. So your wives were purchasing union-made goods, whether they were unions in Thurber or not, or whatnot, and that would
sure. Yeah, you had to do that. Now, single men, okay, families, they rented a house for like $6, $9, something like that, okay, depending on the year. But single men, did they live in mostly boarding houses? Or I've heard that they would people with houses would take in boarders and charge them a fair price. I mean,
we had both cases. So there were boarding houses. Let's see, you had the Knox Hotel where individual boarders would stay at a little bit more of an increased rate than what you would pay for other boarding homes, whether that was just a bed in someone else's house that they were renting and you were paying rent to them and laundry and food to them. Or there were entire boarding homes that were ran, not necessarily by the company, but by individuals as well within the company, who were taking on up to 16 boarders in some cases. And the wives and the daughters would take care of their clothes, food, and cleaning and everything else, and they would just go to work, come home. And
yes, but they would they would make more money than the miners, if my math was right.
Boarding houses, yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you had a house, a 2-bedroom house, and you took one of your bedrooms and you put 4 miners in there, and which wasn't uncommon, and had each one of them pay what, $2 a month or something like that, then you could make more money than your mining husband did.
Yeah, you'd be making $6 a month, and they would be bringing in, depending on how much they had dipped in for script or not. You could be bringing home more than what that, or if they were out sick for a week, you're looking at them being out of work for a week, and so then you would have that supplementary income. Thurber also, the stores also kept on. They would purchase eggs and meat and dairy and whatnot from the animals that people had that they as well. So to help supplement the fresh foods at the mercantile. And so you'd be looking at people who were not officially employed by the company earning from the company.
Yeah,
as well, because they have cash logs where they would pay out for a dozen eggs, a half a dozen eggs.
Yeah, I mean, but you made pennies a day working as a miner. I mean,
it was, I think our highest was like not quite $1.25 per ton, and that was per ton.
Yeah.
And so you were looking at maybe getting a ton to a ton and a half a day if you were a very productive person.
Yeah.
And had found a good scene.
And you, from what I read, depending on when people made from 50 cents a day to $1.50 a day, depending on how much ore you dug out. But you dug it out laying down on by your hands. Okay, is this it over here?
Yes, this is the.
I can't wait to see
and
that.
you can look both from the miner's perspective or higher if you'd like.
Oh wow! But yeah, this is. Okay, I'll narrate it.
Thank you. Yes.
All right. This is a typical miner situation. You would have a coal seam that might be 3 feet thick, okay? And you would have to lay down, and with basically a pick, you'd start knocking chunks of coal out of the wall, and then you would put it in your bucket or in your I don't know what you would call it, car here, and then you would take it and have it screened, and they only paid you for chunks bigger than about a baseball. Okay, well, we're here with Leah Hart. She's just a wealth of information. She obviously loves this subject and loves Thurber. I highly recommend that you come here and get her or one of the other people here who know everything to tell you all kinds of stuff that I never dreamed of. I want to thank you so much for taking us around and showing us this incredible museum, and I can't thank you enough. This is like a bucket list for me to get here and see this and learn more about Thurber. And your knowledge and willingness to talk to us about it is just wonderful. I encourage everyone to come here and grab her and get her to tell you about Thurber, because she knows it. But I suspect there's several other people here that do as well. But my gosh, thank you so much.
Thank you guys for coming out.
Oh, our pleasure. St. Barbara's Church in Thurber, Texas, named for the patron saint of miners. It's a miner's house from Thurber. Miners could rent houses like this for between $6 and $9 a month.